In 1971, in the town of Hexham, in northern England, on a freezing winter afternoon, two young boys were digging up the soil in their backyard to plant potatoes when they stumbled upon two stone heads. The heads had human-like faces, yet they were misshapen, their features twisted and worn, as if they had been buried for centuries. That very night, after bringing the stone heads home, the family began to experience strange and unsettling events. Footsteps echoing up the wooden stairs, knocking at the door in the dead of night, and the sight of a creature that was half human, half wolf prowling the hallway. A renowned anthropologist later took the heads for examination, but his wife was violently pulled from her bed in the middle of the night, and his daughter swore, "There's something faceless watching me in the mirror." This remains one of the most hotly debated supernatural mysteries in all of Britain. On a cold spring afternoon in late 1971, in the northern English town of Hexham, the sky hung heavy and gray like steel. The wind hissed through the rotting wooden fence behind number 3 Reedy Avenue, home to the Robson family. Out in the back garden, the Robsons' two sons, Colin and Leslie, were digging in the soil. They had planned to plant a few potatoes for a school experiment. But instead of a potato, Leslie's hand struck something hard. At first, he thought it was just an ordinary stone. Yet as he brushed away the dirt, what emerged froze them in place: a small stone head, about the size of a hand, with rough features, a protruding nose, and bulging eyes that seemed to glare wildly outward. And then, just beside it lay another head, completely different in expression, longer in shape, its face twisted into deep, aged wrinkles, like someone enduring centuries of anguish. Both were icy cold to the touch, even as the boys' hands were caked with mud. Colin grabbed one, Leslie took the other, and they ran inside to show their mother, Mrs. Robson. Believing them to be old ornaments, she cleaned them up and placed them on the living room table. But from that night on, the atmosphere in the house began to shift. It started with faint tapping sounds, like stone knocking against a wall coming from the hallway. Then, the bedroom door creaked open in the middle of the night with no wind to move it. Colin, the braver of the two, later claimed he saw someone standing at the foot of my bed, small, like a child, but with the face of a stone monster. The next morning, Mrs. Robson discovered the two heads had switched places overnight, though no one had touched them. Days later, she visited the neighbors, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Something's not right in my house since the boys brought those stone heads home," she whispered. "I've heard laughter, not human laughter. It came from inside the wardrobe." Some thought she was joking, until strange things began to happen outside the Robsons' home. The dog from number 5 clawed frantically at its owner's door, barking in terror, then bolted around the yard as if chased by an invisible predator. That same night, one of the Robson children saw a dark figure slip past his bedroom window upright, covered in fur, its eyes glowing red before it vanished into the darkness. Soon, rumors spread through the neighborhood. Some claimed the stone heads were relics from an ancient Celtic ritual. Others whispered they were gateways for wolf spirits to enter the mortal world. When things became too terrifying to bear, the Robsons decided on what they thought was the safest course. They handed the stone heads over to an archaeologist, hoping she could determine their origin. But they had no idea. They had just passed the curse on to another family. After the string of inexplicable events at the Robson house, Mrs. Robson decided she could no longer keep the two stone heads under her roof for even one more night. Through a mutual acquaintance, she was introduced to Dr. Anne Ross, a renowned anthropologist, expert in Celtic artifacts and Northern European folklore. Dr. Ross worked at the British Museum, and with her deep academic expertise, she was eager to examine the two heads, suspecting they might be linked to a pre-Christian civilization. When the heads arrived at her private home in London, she placed them on a wooden shelf beside the fireplace, just as she had done with countless other relics she'd studied. What she didn't realize was that these were not mere pieces of stone. The first night passed uneventfully. But on the second night, at around 2 a.m., Ross awoke to the sound of footsteps echoing through the downstairs hallway. At first, she assumed it was her daughter, Jo. Yet when she peered into the pitch-black corridor, Jo's door was still firmly shut, and the sound of footsteps dragged slowly across the wooden floor, like claws scraping. Then the family dog, normally gentle, suddenly began to growl and bark from under the bed, refusing to come out for an entire week. Ross initially dismissed it as stress from work, perhaps a trick of the mind. But when she later heard whispering in an unfamiliar language emanating from the walls at midnight, she knew she was living with something else entirely. Her daughter Jo told her that one morning, just before dawn, she woke to the sensation of someone breathing at the back of her neck. When she turned, no one was there. But in the mirror, she saw a small, fur-covered figure standing at the foot of her bed. She screamed, switched on the light, and it vanished instantly. The next day, Ross discovered the stone heads were no longer on the shelf. After searching, she found them in the middle of Jo's bedroom floor, placed side by side, facing the window, as though watching something outside. From then on, the family experienced a wave of disturbances. Flickering lights, objects tumbling from shelves without being touched, the sound of running footsteps pounding up and down the stairs with no one there. The worst came on a cold, rainy night, when Ross stepped out of her study and saw a creature less than a meter tall, with thick black fur and a wolf-like head dart across the hallway. She caught a glimpse of its glowing red eyes, reflecting the lamplight before it disappeared behind the curtain. That was when she realized it hadn't come alone. It lived here now. Though a steadfast woman of science, Ross finally called upon the help of a priest and a folklorist. But every attempt to explain the phenomenon hit a dead end. The heads did not match any known culture, showed no signs of modern craftsmanship, and could not be reliably dated. It was as if they had simply formed within the earth, waiting to be found. And then, a new figure stepped into the story, with a claim that sent shockwaves through everyone involved. She swore she had made the two heads herself 20 years earlier. The story, which had seemed to revolve solely around the strange stone heads, suddenly took an unexpected turn when a woman named Mrs. Dodds, living not far from Hexham, contacted the local newspaper. She claimed, "My husband made those two heads from leftover cement, using children's hand molds." Experts and journalists immediately rushed to verify her statement. They tracked down Mr. Dodds, now elderly and frail, and he confirmed, "I made the heads in the late 52nd for my son to play with. When we moved house later, I assumed they got buried in the soil." If this was true, then was the entire supernatural saga nothing but a case of mass hysteria? A collective psychological illusion? But the strange happenings didn't stop. Shortly after his statement was published, the town of Hexham began witnessing bizarre events far beyond the Robson property. Mrs. Agnes, a widow living alone a few doors down from the Robsons, reported hearing someone knock on her door 3 times every night at exactly 2 a.m., yet no one was there. One night, she flung the door open the moment the knocking stopped and saw a short, fur-covered figure bent over, sniffing her feet. When she screamed, it bolted away, running like a wolf, but upright on 2 human-like legs. Across town, a 7-year-old boy was admitted to hospital in a state of shock, eyes rolled back, muttering, "It said, it will take my head if I tell." His parents swore that he had seen a 2-legged dog standing outside his bedroom window in the night. They thought it was just a nightmare until they found scratch marks on the outside glass the next morning. Word began to spread of a name, the Hexham Wolf, a half-man, half-wolf creature that always seemed to appear after the 2 stone heads had been unearthed. Fear gripped the community. Some residents moved away. Others began digging holes in their gardens, believing that if the heads could rise from the ground, something else might be buried deeper. Archaeologists arrived to conduct surveys but found nothing unusual. The 2 heads, despite Mr. Dodds's claim, remained locked away in the museum, never put on public display. So how could the phenomena across the town be explained? One theory emerged. Even if the heads were man-made, their shape, expressions, and materials might have accidentally replicated a sacred figure from long-forgotten folk beliefs, creating a bridge for some ancient entity to return. When a group of folk magicians visited Hexham to perform a black earth sealing ritual, they left the townspeople shaken with a single statement: "You have awakened something, and now it has eyes to see, legs to walk, and a head to remember." After the strange phenomena spread throughout the town, the local authorities, who had at first dismissed the incident as a joke, were forced to take notice. Though they never officially acknowledged it, many members of the town council quietly moved away or sent their children to schools elsewhere. Nobody said it aloud, but everyone knew Hexham had been marked by something not of this world. Meanwhile, the 2 stone heads remained in the possession of the British Museum. Then one day, they were transferred into the hands of a man named Frank Hyde, a reclusive but well-known folklore researcher. Frank believed such artifacts should not be locked away, but rather listened to. Living alone in a small house in Durham, he placed the heads facing each other on a small altar, inside a ring of Celtic stones. He began recording even the smallest changes in his home: temperature, sounds, light, even scents carried on the wind. But what happened next went far beyond research. In a journal later recovered, Frank wrote, "Night 3. I dreamed of a stone hand pressing on my chest. Its bulging eyes stared at me, and I couldn't breathe. I woke with bruises. Night 7. I heard children running around the house. I live alone. When I opened the door, no one was there, but the back door stood wide open. Grass was trampled in the shape of animal footprints. Night 11. I dreamed I was running in a forest, chased by myself, except I had claws. No one saw Frank after night 12. Police were called when neighbors realized he hadn't left the house. The doors were locked, the lights still on, but inside, he was gone. On his desk lay the unfinished journal. The final page contained only a scrawled line: "They don't need the heads anymore. They found a body." There was no sign of forced entry, no blood, and no evidence of a crime. But what haunted people most was this: the 2 stone heads were also gone. No one knew where they went, who took them, or claimed responsibility. And Frank Hyde himself, despite having a public record, family, and identification seemed to vanish from every system, as if he had never existed. Some dismissed it as coincidence. Yet in the weeks following, dozens of people living near Frank's home reported sleepwalking always toward the forest behind his house. One awoke barefoot, clothes caked in mud, with no memory. Another said, "In my dream, I saw a stone head roll toward me, but when I picked it up, its face was breathing." We've gone through the witnesses, the sleepwalking, and the disappearances without farewells. But what has haunted me for years is the silence from those who should have spoken. I'm talking about the British Museum, the last known place to hold the strange stone heads. After Frank Hyde vanished, every record of him, the transfer of the heads, and all correspondence between him and the museum disappeared from public archives. Independent researchers requesting access to the files were denied. The curator of the folklore collection at the time resigned just a few months later. Before leaving, he sent a private letter to a colleague. One passage was particularly chilling. "We shouldn't keep them in storage. They're not artifacts. They're something that knows it's being watched. They didn't come to be studied. They came to be found." Later, folklorists proposed many theories. Some claim the heads were ancient wards buried to restrain a guardian creature on the border between human and beast. When unearthed, the seal was broken and the creature awoke. Others believe the heads were physical embodiments of the Anglo-Saxon concept of word, fate itself, meaning whoever possessed them would be drawn into an inescapable loop. The darkest theory? That the heads were not representations of anything at all, but the creatures themselves, waiting to inhabit a suitable host. Years later, I returned to Hexham. The old houses still stood, but nobody dared stay long. Some local children, born after the events, claimed they dreamed nightly of digging in their gardens, touching something hard and cold, and looking up to find something watching them from beneath the soil. I tried to dismiss it all until I listened again to an old interview recording with Mrs. Robson, the first person to receive the heads. Her voice was frail, trembling, yet unmistakably certain. "I know someone still has them, and if they still do, then this has never ended." And so, the Hexham Heads remain one of Britain's strangest supernatural cases. No bodies, no crime, but over 50 years of lingering fear and an unnamed entity that still lives on in the memories of those who saw it. I won't tell you to believe or not, but if one day, while gardening, you unearth something with stone eyes staring back at you, remember, don't take it inside. If you were the first to find the heads, would you hand them to a museum, keep them as a curiosity, or bury them deep and never speak of them again?